Hey guys, and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. First and foremost, just to apologise for the lack of a video last week. For those who don't follow me on Facebook or Instagram, may not have been aware of what I was up to, but basically last week I was out in Frankfurt at Music Messe representing Yamaha. And then from there flew straight down to Italy and spent a week teaching in Tuscany at Guitar Breaks. Now, if you missed the video I did on Guitar Breaks a little while ago, do check it out. It was an incredible experience with some fantastic guys. Just basically a week talking, teaching, learning, jamming in a gorgeous part of the world, eating an incredible amount of incredible food. So despite the intention actually being to make a video on the go last week, if I wasn't playing guitar, I was most likely working my way through about 4 courses of food. Incredible food, as I said, but there tends to be a limit to the amount of cheese you can eat after a while. So it's nice to get back to beans on toast this week. But I digress. As I said, this is a video that I've wanted to make for a little while, but I've kind of shied away from on multiple levels, just because I've been a little bit reticent to kind of make something that could be considered clickbaity, but that is undoubtedly what this is, especially with a title like Good Tone from Bad Gear. Now, the point of this video is not to malign any bit of gear as bad, so much as it is to highlight the ways in which, I guess personally, I can only speak for myself, how I would get good tone, or at least usable tone, from situations that are less than ideal. We've all done them, whether it's jam nights, whether it's getting up and plugging in using not your guitar into not your pedals, into not your amp, or whether it's getting up as a bit of a kind of surprise guest at a gig, plugging into stuff that you're not particularly familiar with. We've all been in situations where, in a perfect world, we would have our own backline, we would have our guitar, we would have our favourite overdrive pedal, etc., etc. But it happens. And this video is basically just to try and highlight how I would go about in those situations, getting something that I thought was usable. As I said, it's far from, to malign any bit of gear as not good. But the 2 pieces of gear I've chosen for this are, drum roll please, a Marlin Strat. Now, if you're not familiar with Marlin, as the vast majority may not well be, they were made, I think this was probably, it's called the Sidewinder, should you wish to do a bit of research. This was made in the 80s in the UK, Wales specifically, I think, so I should probably feel a little bit more affinity to it than I probably do, but made in Wales in the 80s, before manufacture then be taken out of the East somewhere, I think, and they were relatively inexpensive guitars, but, do the job, look a little bit like a Strat, even the shape of the headstock, which is something that you probably wouldn't get away with these days. And it actually took me a little while to figure out why it looks so different. And if you haven't figured it out yet, it is the fact that the top pickup is at an angle, and the bottom one, as you would expect on a Strat to be angled, is actually straight. So, a little kind of curiosity, as much as anything else, that a mate of mine has kindly loaned me for this video. So that is the guitar. And then the last thing that we're going to be using before the amp is the much renowned Frontline Series 2 distortion. Much like you, I have no idea what this is. Bob, the drummer in Buckingham, has very kindly loaned me this pedal, as probably has zero expectations of having seen it again. It's a distortion pedal with a lack of a feature that I tend to find absolutely essential with pedals, and that is a tone control. Especially with pedals where you're not especially familiar with how they sound, I think a tone control is an absolute essential in being able to kind of maybe dial out some undesirable kind of higher end maybe, and making things a little bit more usable, especially with distortion pedals, which can be pretty full on. So I have no idea how that sounds, but we shall find out soon. And the last kind of point of the signal chain is a concession that I've allowed myself, and that is guitar rig. 2 reasons. A, I'm not in a situation to mic stuff up at the moment, in which case it probably would have been the ubiquitous PB Bandit, but also the fact so you can hear it properly. I get a good assessment on whether it sounds good or not. I'm going to set the tone in guitar rig as a relatively sterile, relatively straight up, kind of middle of the road kind of tones, but it's nothing great to start off with. And we shall see what we shall get, even. I'm going to talk you through the process as I go through it, so it's not just going to be a case of cut to tone, but, hopefully kind of talk you through my process, talk you through what I would do and what I would change, and what I am changing, and, see how we get on. So, without further ado, let's see how we get on. So here we are on stage at our dream gig scenario, although dream is probably not the right word in this case, although nightmare would probably be a little bit harsh, so let's say our less than ideal gig scenario. That's got a nice ring to it, hasn't it? So the one thing I did neglect to mention earlier is the power supply I'm using. It is just a cheapy little power bank, which apparently promises 100 milliamps for each outlet, and there are 10. But personally, I wouldn't believe the hype, and I think any more than 2-3 pedals, we would probably start introducing hum into the signal. So we get on stage and we're handed our red Marlin Sidewinder plugged into an AC30, or at least an AC30 emulation in this case even, which sounds like this. Now I'm going to refrain from calling anything bad, because obviously one man's meatloaf is indeed another man's poison, but at least to my ears, that's a very unforgiving, very bright, brittle, kind of harsh bridge pickup tone that doesn't feel too great under the fingers. So we're going to try and make that a little bit more palatable. Bridge pickups on Strats tend to have a reputation for kind of being a little bit brittle sounding anyway. So the first thing I would do is work my way back to the neck pickup and see what difference we've got. So bridge pickup. Okay, not a massive amount of difference if I'm honest, but at least something to work with, not only just because we've introduced the ability to alter the tone. Again, it's a fairly kind of unforgiving tone, I guess. So the first thing that I would really look to do is just change the way I play. I'm going to try and limit myself as to how much I actually adjust the amp in this, because I guess in the sort of frantic gig situation that you might find yourself in, changing the amp, especially in AC30 where everything is backwards or upside down or back to front or whatever when you're looking at it from top side, it's not the most ideal of situations. So we're going to first and foremost try and just change the way we play very slightly. And this, I can tell this is a guitar that doesn't react particularly well, at least at these settings, just to really being hit. So I think the best way to do that is just to try and play it a little bit more delicately and a little bit more subtly, I guess. So instead of maybe using your pick, use the back of your fingers. Straight away, it's a little bit darker, a little bit more forgiving. Obviously, your pick is there if you need it, but for me at least, I would definitely look at using my fingers as an alternative. That then applies for kind of solo stuff. So whether you're doing again, I wouldn't call it a good tone, but I definitely wouldn't call it a bad tone. So straight away we're warming things up a little bit and getting to the point where things are a little bit more usable. The thing I haven't touched up until this point has actually been the tone control. So again, when we're on a neck pickup, we've introduced the capacity to be able to kind of warm things up a little bit using that. So let's get into that. Actually introduces the capacity to be able to, at least for me, dig in with my pick as well again. I won't comment on the guitar's tuning. I think it's still technically in tune, but it's just a little intonation issues here and there. But again, you kind of adapt to that and you kind of play around it. So that's the kind of guitar set. Obviously, we've got 4 other pickup positions that we can kind of experiment with. But to kind of keep things moving, we're going to go onto the pedal, which, as I said, I have no idea what this sounds like. I've just plugged it in. I checked it worked, and This is going to be a first time for me. So at present, we've got the level set at around 2 o'clock, and we have the distortion set around 2 o'clock as well. So if it's like distortion pedals, I know this is going to be fairly drastic. So clean tone, distortion, wow, that's interesting, isn't it? That is undoubtedly distorted. So my gripe with people that turn pedals up to the max straight away and expect them to sound good is it's going to be a terrible analogy, but if you bought a car and you were suddenly, you know, a little bit unimpressed by the way that it handled when it's doing 120 miles an hour, why would you expect it to handle the same as if you're doing 40 miles an hour? You know, if it's not a car that is meant to, or designed to do that, then you were always going to be unimpressed. And, you know, likewise, I would argue that this pedal is not designed to kind of run at its maximum settings. So the most obvious and first place we're going to start is actually dialing the distortion back. Again, the first thing I noticed about this pedal earlier is that the pots are a little bit crackly, so I do apologise for any crackles we get, but right, we're getting into a little bit more usable territory here. So the gain is now set at about 11 o'clock as opposed to 2, 3 or whatever it was before. Bizarrely, the first thing I would do here is actually introduce some of the tone that we rolled off earlier. I think it's getting a little bit dark and a little bit woolly. So if we bring some of that back in. Again, it's not a tone that I would be in a rush to use, but it's definitely a tone you could work with. Let's see what that sounds like with some of the other pickups. Again, it's not great, but it's definitely usable. So, as I said, I've rolled my tone back up to full there, actually. So it's worth bearing in mind that something that may work for a clean tone is not necessarily going to sound perfect for a distorted tone. As I said, the distortion on the pedal is set around 11 o'clock. As I said earlier as well, it would be nice to have tone control on the pedal, just to be able to kind of fine tweak a little bit more, but the whole point of this exercise is to kind of deal with whatever you are given. So, just to recap, if we roll our clean tone, if we roll our tone down rather to about there, and get on to the neck pickup, I'm going to say this is my clean tone. Again, as I said, it's not something I would be in a rush to gig with, but that is perfectly usable. If we then step on the distortion, I'm going to bring my tone back up. Hopefully you hear the difference. there we go. As I said, this is not a tone I would be in a rush to gig with, but I think in terms of overall kind of usability, if that is a word, that is something that I would, get through a couple of songs with at the very least. So just for a very quick recap even on what I did, first thing I did was get off the bridge pickup. Bridge pickups on Strats are renowned for being kind of very brittle and very bright. Get onto the neck pickup and see how that kind of warms things up a little bit. Then maybe have a look at your tone controls. As I said, I rolled my tone control about half. Any more below that was a little bit kind of woolly and a little bit indistinct. And then in terms of using the distortion pedals, just be sensible in terms of where you're expecting them to operate, and if you were on its maximum setting, it's never going to sound great. There's not many pedals or amps which are designed to run absolutely flat out, so just be sensible in what you expect of it. My favourite tone I got out of this pedal when I backed the distortion back to around 11 o'clock. It sounded a little bit like this. I forget what key you're playing in. There we have it. I hope that is of some use to some people. It's just a very quick run through on how I would go about achieving, as I said, a usable tone from a situation which is far from ideal. So, as ever, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do subscribe, and I shall see you next week. Normal service has been resumed for another episode of Friday Fretworks. Cheers, guys. Take care.